1, 2, 3, let's go. Step, Asambe, step. Takatitsa science, baba to industrialize. When I had a jambo, we them come by, we are stigmatizing, baby. Good over science, baba to industrialize. When I had a jambo, we them come by, we are stigmatizing, baby. Ihuru bende yati, kuti udzidze mahara, daitsira kuti, hande machinda hande.
ZimDef, in collaboration with the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development and universities, held 8 joint STEM luncheons across the country. The luncheons were aimed at unpacking STEM as a key driver of industrialization and modernization, as well as the STEM-driven transformational trajectory which universities have since embraced. The first joint STEM luncheon was held in Harare, with close to 150 delegates attending, which included some from the University of Zimbabwe, the Harare Institute of Technology, and the Zimbabwe Open University. The Deputy Minister for Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development, Dr. Godfrey Gandawa, opened the presentations by emphasizing the commitment by their ministry to the STEM initiative.
We cannot continue to ignore the global trends shifting towards STEM. There is a need for a serious curriculum review in all our institutions, be it polytechnics, teachers' colleges, and universities. Students deserve a modern education right now, not tomorrow. They deserve the right education right now, instead of the 19th century style of education that we currently have. With a STEMatized curriculum, we can radically close the technological and mental gap between what the current education system offers and what contemporary industry requires. Reform of universities or curriculum is an abstract idea. We all know that a successful reform would bring results not in 5 years, but in 10, 20 or 30 years. So we are focusing, we are looking in the future. When we are saying let's reform our curriculum, what are we looking at? We are not saying let's change the curriculum for the next 2 years, which means we have to be futuristic when we are designing our programs. We need to visualize how the future will look like, how the new industries will be. Then we transform our curriculum as institutions of higher learning to suit that. Otherwise, we will continue to lag behind. So we should be focusing in the next 10 years to say, how will our industry look like? How do we want our institutions to be? What kind of programs are relevant for that future? But I'm just looking at the University of Zimbabwe. I'm looking at the Harare Institute of Technology. I'm looking at Delta. I'm looking at Econet. I'm looking at NOIC. I'm looking at Chinhoyi University of Technology. And I'm saying, where will my institution be in 2031? Then a question would arise. What are the aspirations of this country? What are the aspirations of Zimbabwe? When we are defining how our organizations are operating, when we are defining how our institutions of higher learning are teaching, are we looking at the aspirations of Zimbabwe? What are these? We need to define what are the aspirations of this country. Then we map how our institutions operate today towards that aspiration. In my view, we aspire to be a country that is driven by innovation. Our economy must be driven by innovation, because we are driving into the knowledge and digital economy. Are our institutions or are our companies working towards that? Universities have the intellectual capacity, but they need to refocus. And industry has the financial capacity, but need to get off their shell. Participation of both the academia and industry in the transformation of the economy is crucial, and it gives the impetus to a far greater next step. The government alone cannot define and achieve the economic transformation of this country.
ZimDev CEO, Mr. Frederick Mandizidza, went on to highlight the need to develop the relevant human capital skill, which will have the competence to produce products that can compete at a global level.
It's important that we focus very well ourselves in terms of the stage of economic development that we are in as a nation. And it is because of the dictates of our times that we have focused on the STEM initiative. We aspire to compete globally as a nation, and that can only materialize if the country produces the relevant skills and competencies to make the industry function, to make industry competitive. This is on the basis that competencies that make an economy globally competitive reside in its in the human capacity or human capital that we have. So unless we focus on our human capital, we can try to compete at global level, but we will do so in vain. Because the types and quality of products that we will produce will never compete well in the global markets. And I was thinking and saying, okay, as Zimbabweans, we are renowned of high quality of education. And our quality of education is testified in the sense that we have the highest literacy rate in Africa, at 92%. But there is very little to show for that high literacy rate. One wants to ask and say, what is wrong with this high literacy rate? Because if we've got a high literacy rate, we must definitely have products and services that are competing globally, competitively. And we must be producing products that are actually changing the game at global markets. But that is not happening. The challenge is in the manner in which we train and produce our graduates from our institutions of higher learning and through the education system. Therefore, we have people that are good at reading and writing. And for that reason, we are renowned, and we continue to buttress that myth that we write good documents, we plan very well, but implementation is next to zero. And we need to change that mindset. We might aspire to industrialize and modernize, but we need to address the real fundamentals that allow us to industrialize and modernize. And one of the critical things that we need to look at in that respect is the kind of skills that we have and the kind of technologies that we are embracing and using. If our industry today continues to use old types of equipment and machinery in the digital era, clearly the product that you produce is of a lesser quality as compared to the one that is produced using digital systems. So the need to embrace new technologies is critical. Therefore, universities are challenged to come up with new programs to equip those that will go into industry with the relevant skills. But at the same time, industry itself must also respond. Before industry gets the relevant skills that it requires, it must respond by making an input into the development of the curriculum that is produced in our universities, because you must have a say in the shaping of the product that you want to employ in your company. And it is with that we find out that STEM is a strategic human capital strategy for talent pipeline management, as already indicated by the Honorable Deputy Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude my presentation by simply stating that STEM is the future of industrialization and modernization. There is no development outside STEM. We cannot talk about development in any area without harnessing STEM. And to survive, industry should embrace emerging technologies. But industry must also play an active role in making an input in the type of curriculum which is supposed to come from our institutions of higher learning, where high-end skills are being produced. And that way, we will make Zimbabwe globally competitive and grow into the future. I thank you.
Different tertiary institutions had an opportunity to present on their contribution to industrialization and the modernization of Zimbabwe's economy. The Dean at the Harare Institute of Technology, HIT, Mr. Willard Gwarimbo, was the first to present the role the institution is playing to achieve industrialization and modernization in line with the STEM initiative.
When a project is done, it is the university that should guide the students. But I want also to add on that industry should also come to universities and say, here are our problems. Can you research on them? The criticism that universities have been having is that, you see, your graduates are not fit for any purpose. When you look into other nations, they invest particularly in the capstone design. They will come and fund students in the capstone design of their choice. In the developed world, it is industry that go to the higher institutions and say, we have this particular challenge, we want a solution. But in the developing world, it is the doctor, the higher institution, who go to institutions and say, we think you are not feeling well. Can you come? We want to give you a prescription.
The Pro-Vice-Chancellor for the Zimbabwe Open University, Professor Gabriel Kabanda, emphasized the impact of having a STEMatized economy and highlighted the effects it has on food security.
Our production capacity in our yield production in terms of cereals in Zimbabwe in particular, it's not as high as it should be. Per hectare, Zimbabwe is producing something like 500 kgs. In comparison to countries like Zambia, we are producing twice as much as Zimbabwe. And surprisingly, countries like Malawi are producing 3 times per hectare than Zimbabwe when it comes to cereals production such as maize and wheat and so on. And you look at countries like South Africa, we're talking of 5,000 and going all the way to Mauritius. So when you look at Zimbabwe in comparison to other SADC region, we realize truly that we are not producing as much as we can. And so our approach as universities, including ZO, is one way we want to see ourselves getting back to the ground to address exactly that problem. Why are we not producing enough? Why is our hectare, our production capacity per hectare less than half of that of Zambia? Where are we going wrong? So the production capacity, this is why we are now looking at even our programs in agriculture and some of the skills and competencies that we are producing to be issues that need to be addressed urgently as part of the innovation that we are looking at a national level.
Professor Paul Mapfumo from the University of Zimbabwe concluded the presentations from tertiary institutions. He spoke of the need to take introspection as institutions of higher and tertiary education so that they can be better placed to address the challenges facing Zimbabwe as a nation.
As the University of Zimbabwe, we are trying to look at ourselves as the oldest university in the country, and really interrogate some of the problems we are facing as a nation, and interrogate also our role in solving some of those problems and challenges. The problem can be characterized as low productivity. And when I say low productivity, I mean across the board. It's in the generation of knowledge and requisite expertise, which can match the problems we are facing. It's also in technology. It's also in the management models that are efficient, that are really consistent with the levels of technology that are required or the type of solutions that are in demand. STEM provides solutions or opportunities for providing solutions. But then we also have the humanities, which really create the demand for some of the solutions. As we see that our people sometimes have problems in assimilating technology, using technology, ending with those things that you say technology is on the shelf. It means that we have not done enough social engineering, enough of the engineering of our humanities to create a society that can consume technology. And if we don't do that, we don't make business.
Now, this is your session. I want to thank the presenters who spoke on different issues, very absorbing.
The delegates were given an opportunity to comment and ask questions to the various presenters on the subject, for which the presenters gave some satisfactory responses.
You want to query, what is it that you want to agree with, and what are the solutions that you want to proffer as a way forward? Can I have people coming through to ask questions?
As the STEM initiative is gathering momentum, as elaborated by ZimDev and our Honorable Deputy Minister, there's a need for serious support to upscale regulatory frameworks so that they run concurrently with the development and adoption of these technologies.
The other presenter from ZimDev, Mr. Mandizridza, I think he talked about 10 to 15 years. I think if it's something that is synchronized and all players are coming together, we need to know what are those timelines where we need to measure our trip to achieving the goals that we are talking about. And I didn't hear a common thread in terms of the institutions that are going to get involved, the business sector. What are our targets in terms of time-bound, measurable milestones that we want to be able to follow through in this? I thank you. So I may have a comment on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As we move around, questions are being asked that the STEM train is moving. What will be the fate of the passengers in the train come 2018, especially those in Form 6, as far as funding is concerned? Thank you.
My request to the relevant authorities is if consideration can be given to give incentives as well for other companies or organizations to support the STEM initiative in this regard. I thank you.
Is there any incentive that is offered to companies so that they can provide more scholarships? Thank you very much for that.
Who's going to provide the first response?
We want our everyone, industry, academic institutions, to start to engage and say, like the presenters have been saying, to say the culture in Zimbabwe is the university that is expected to go to industry and say, what problems do you have? Whereas it should be the industry themselves who should be saying, we have these problems and we want them solved. Then they engage and say a solution could come within such a period of time. So I think there is still need to engage. Like in my presentation, I indicated that ZimDef, we have charged ZimDef to coordinate and come up with a STEM strategy, which must then come up with a proper time frame for the implementation. And I think the gentleman who commented actually mentioned the implementation. For sure, I agree. In Zimbabwe, we have that kind of problem. We talk, we come up with good, proper documents, but we still lack in terms of implementation because we don't set time frames. Like he's saying, I agree with what he's saying, but I hope there shall be a session where we really need to engage seriously, positively with the industry, academia, and government to come up with a strategy which we have time frames. Thank you.
There are a few questions which are still outstanding, and I will respond to them. The first one is to do with the funding modality of the STEM initiative and its sustainability. Let me say that the STEM initiative, which started in 2016, was initiated to run for 10 years. And during those 10 years, ZimDef is going to be funding plus or minus 5,000 students. Will be moving over from O level to A level, Form 5. But at any given time, we must be funding plus or minus 10,000 students, both lower and upper 6. That means that funding arrangement is in place. But let me also state that this is a national initiative, a national program, which requires collaboration from all stakeholders. And part of the whole dynamics of the STEM initiative is to invite industry to actively take part in this process, to collaborate with the Zimbabwe Manpower Development Fund, to mobilize resources and support the STEM students so that we create the necessary resources that can unlock the value for both industry and society in general. However, when we are looking at university level, it's now a bigger challenge, very bigger, a bigger challenge in more than we expect at O and A level stage. At that level, one, we expect universities to put in place scholarships. And I can say some universities have already started putting in place such modalities in place. Just a few days ago, Lupane State University announced that they have got 60 scholarships which they are offering to STEM students. And other universities, I'm actually aware that they are working on that, putting together some scholarships to make sure that the process is sustainable beyond the A-level support we're giving. But ultimately, it is expected that all players, including industry, will come to the part and support this whole process, because it is in our interest as a nation, it is in our interest as industries, it is in our interest as the generation of today to make sure that an initiative of this nature succeeds.
We are challenging other companies to come on board to support
The Harare STEM 263 Business Luncheon was a resounding success. Next stop was Bulawayo, where the business communities and institutions of higher education will get an opportunity to discuss on this very important program, the STEM 263. Join us next week in Bulawayo.